Morning Talk on SAFM.
It's 24 minutes to 11 and we are talking about legal matters now. Enver Daniels is the Chief State Law Advisor. He's going to be joining us in a short while, but we are talking about the Legal Practice Bill, which was tabled in Parliament last month. The bill aims to put a framework in place that facilitates the transformation and restructuring of the legal profession. Let's welcome Enver Daniels. Good morning to you and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Ike. Thanks.
Talk to me like you're talking to a 6-year-old about the Legal Practices Bill.
Like a 6-year-old? Sure.
Yes, make me understand, not the legalese.
Establishing a legal practice council to regulate the whole of the legal profession, including the advocates and the attorneys. In other words, if you want to become an attorney or an advocate, you have to register with the Legal Practice Council.
Mm-hmm. And what are the main objectives?
The main objectives are to increase access to the profession, regulate it in the public interest, protect the public, and ensure that we get the demographics right, in the sense that we make it easier for black people and women to enter the profession, to equalize the numbers.
What is the current status quo?
Of
the profession? Of
the profession. Currently we have about 4,762 advocates, and we have about 20,000 attorneys. Of the 4,762 advocates, approximately 3,000 are males, 1,400 are females. Of those, about 2,500 are white. Of the 20,000 attorneys, 13,000 are white.
So, in essence, this bill aims to transform the profession?
Yeah, that's the main objective.
Does that suggest then that there are bodies we know that are operational in this instance? What's going to happen to them?
The bodies will basically merge to form a transitional council. Initially, there will be a transitional council that will advise the minister on how the transformation must take place and how the profession should be regulated. That transitional council will also take steps to appoint or to have a new legal practice council established. Basically, every legal practitioner in the country, whether you're an advocate or an attorney, will then become a member of the Legal Practice Council. Which
bodies are we talking about that are currently operational, that are going to be merged?
We're talking about the Law Society of South Africa, the different law societies, the two law societies that operate in the Old-Bafut, Swana and Venda, and we're talking about the GCP and its constituent bodies.
What has been the reaction ever since this bill was tabled, especially from people that...
The reaction since the bill was tabled has been mixed, and we're not certain why it's been mixed. Bear in mind the process of drafting the legal practice bill commenced under Dalla Omar in 1995, already a year after our democracy. Dalla had asked the legal profession to come up with a blueprint and draft legislation to transform the legal profession in accordance with the democratic ethos.
So this is just progressing from what was drawn up then and the invitation from the late Dalla Omar?
Yeah, actually, under Dalla Omar, we weren't able to make much progress because the profession itself, and Dalla Omar had asked the profession to come up with some suggestions, could not agree on what should be done to transform the profession.
0891 104 207, that's the telephone number to dial. Now, the big question would be, you have these bodies that are operating in this fraternity, sure, and you expect, because the country is transforming itself, that they would also lean towards that instead of there being legislation that will persuade or maybe force them to transform, for lack of a better word.
Sure. Dalla Omar had hoped that the profession will come up with means and mechanisms to transform itself. I suppose in hindsight that was wishful thinking. Then under Penwell Maduna, the second Minister of Justice, he asked the profession to get together and did in fact establish various teams to look at the issue of transformation, and those teams couldn't agree amongst themselves.
0891 104 207, telephone number to dial in the studio. Enver Daniels is the Chief State Law Advisor. We're talking about the Legal Practice Bill, which was tabled in Parliament last month, which aims to put a framework in place that facilitates the transformation and restructuring of the legal profession. Are there time frames within which you are operating?
Yes, they are. When the bill is passed and enacted into law, a transitional council will be set up. that transitional council will have a life which will last for only 3 years. And in the 3 years, it's got to advise the minister on a number of things. But the main focus of the transitional council will, in fact, be to establish the Legal Practice Council.
Okay, well, we're going to take calls and just find out what people's thoughts are with regards to this. Sure. And legal practitioners, we understand they are also going to have to operate under one code of practice. How practical is that? Because some people will say that advocates and junior lawyers shouldn't be under one body.
Sure. Well, the advocates operate in a different way to the attorneys. And in fact, they are self-regulated. The advocates set their own fees. They determine how they're going to operate. To a large extent, they determine who becomes an advocate. They take steps against advocates. We are saying that there must be one uniform admission system, and there must be one uniform system which regulates the profession, and there must be one uniform system to discipline the profession. But those aren't the only issues we are interested in. We are looking at how we fundamentally transform the legal profession, how we open up the legal profession, to black people, particularly black women, how we establish legal firms in the rural areas, how we make it possible for people in the rural areas to have easy, relatively cheap access to lawyers, and how we enable people in the rural areas, poor people and other people, to access services which they currently have difficulty in accessing. The Legal Practice Council will advise on those issues. Let's go to Macbeth in Bombela. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Ike. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Macbeth?
Good. Mr. Envert Niels, how are you?
I'm well, thanks, and you?
Good. I'm a practitioner here in Bombela.
Yeah.
It's virtually a small town, and the remnants of apartheid are still very wide open here. And I am of the view that Mr. Jeff Radebe started a good job. Long awaited. I mean, we are talking about 16 years.
Sure.
Since Mr. Dala Omar has brought this thing for discussion. He was a practitioner himself. He was a many victim of this legal bodies that were created under an act, to which an act at the time, which is the Attorneys Act, well, it did not give the basis of accepting black practitioners to it, but it was mainly done to accept a certain group, and black people had to, from time to time, try and adapt under those chilling circumstances that were there. And why I'm saying this, Mr. Daniels, is it's because it goes right at the bottom of what is government looking at it as a transformation. Look, for a black child to enter the legal profession, you need to find a law firm and then register articles. For an average black firm, it takes them 4 months to register articles. And for an average white firm, it takes them a week. So that is a step back in terms of the intake of black people coming into the profession. Then you go on. Within the profession, you have to be respectful. You have to do this because you'll be scared. You are likely to be challenged. Myself, I've reported a number of racism complaints within my legal board, which is the LSNP. None of them has been ever investigated. And it shows that how siding it is with a certain color, race color, within the profession. So now, bringing this uniformity and making sure that there will be one legal counsel that is going to deal with all of us will make us very comfortable, because if one looks at the KwaZulu-Natal Law Society, it's the most progressive of them all combined. And ours in the LSNP, which has the majority in the country, stifles this progress. And the manner in which they're stifling, and I see that they hinder to bring applications to court and whatsoever. Clearly, the more they delay the application of the legal practice bill, is the more they eat, the more there's reserved work for certain people, because obviously, you know, as a conveyancer, you are being treated differently to an ordinary general practitioner.
We've got your point, Macbeth, and we've got to go to the other calls. Thanks for your call anyway. John, you're in Port Elizabeth. Welcome.
Hi, morning to you.
Morning, John.
Morning. I was wondering if I could pose one question and then listen to an answer on the radio, or
Sure.
not a question, but ask for a bit more of an explanation for the man in the street.
Sure.
In the current situation, the regulatory bodies, in which way do they prevent or discriminate against, let's say, a black person with a law degree? And in what way is it proposed that the new regulatory body would make it easier for a suitably qualified black person to practice as either an advocate or an attorney?
We've got your point, John. Khasaldin, you are in Cape Town.
Hi there.
Hi there.
I'd like to ask the question to Enver. Seeing that the bill has come from the time that the late Minister Dullah Omar was the minister, why has it taken so long? And we've listened to his comments, because I believe the legal profession are a monopoly, black, white, colored, or Indian. It's a monopoly because one of the reasons I think Mr. Enver is not disclosing is because they were fighting against the government, including the paralegals into the legal practice bill, and also giving them better status in representing people in court of law, as well as the CCMA and other institutions. Can Mr. Enver also tell us then why are the paralegals still being excluded, or why are they not being included to at least practice those fields that they have studied for and also been qualified for? Why can't they represent people in court of law? I'll listen on the radio.
We've got your point, Khasaldin. Enver, I'm going to ask you to respond.
Yeah, certainly. In respect to Macbeth's question, we need to also point out that an ombudsman is going to be appointed, and the ombudsman will hear complaints not only from the general public but also practitioners. So the sort of complaints that Macbeth mentions and which haven't received attention could be submitted to a legal ombudsman who will be totally independent and appointed by the president, and that ombudsman will in fact deal with complaints. That ombudsman will also be able to monitor and to investigate some of the decisions taken by the Legal Practice Council and its committees. So, for example, if an ombudsman feels that there has been a misdirection or an irregularity in a disciplinary hearing, the legal ombudsman could intervene. And so the legal ombudsman it's not a new idea, but finally we've included it in a bill which, when it becomes law, will play a very useful role in ensuring that the attorney's profession is conducted in an ethical way, and that the complaints of the general public and practitioners are attended to. Per se, there's no discrimination in the advocates and the attorneys' profession. What we have a concern about at the moment is access to the profession, and it's very difficult to get access into the profession, particularly for poor people, particularly for black people, particularly for women. What we've decided to do is to give the Legal Practice Council the ability and the power to, in fact, make recommendations to the minister as to how we can increase access to the profession and encourage, in fact, people who've been prevented from entering the profession to get into the profession. In respect of the third caller, and I didn't catch his name, unfortunately, he's quite correct. Dullah Omar had pushed very strongly for the recognition of paralegals. I myself, in my discussions with the profession, had pushed very carefully for that. In 16 years, we were not able to get agreement within the profession on what a legal practice bill should look like. And so we've decided on a compromise which says we set up a legal practice bill at the moment. We pass a legal practice bill which sets up a legal practice council to regulate the whole of the profession, and to which every practitioner must belong, whether you're an advocate or an attorney, whether you're a notary or conveyancer, you belong to that. Then we say to the Legal Practice Council, you advise on how we further open up the profession. So in certain respects, we've adopted an approach which maintains the status quo, in the sense that we say you can only appear in court if you're an admitted legal practitioner, and on the other hand, we are saying to the Legal Practice Council, you advise us. One of the concerns of the profession has been, and I suppose the public at large, is that the minister would interfere too much in the regulation of the profession and how it conducts its business. And so what we've done is we've said to the Legal Practice Council, you advise us on transformation and access and other things relating to the council, and we will implement the regulations. We only intervene as government when the Legal Practice Council doesn't do its work properly or cannot fulfill its functions, and then government will intervene. Otherwise, it's a cooperative relationship between the Legal Practice Council and the Minister, looking at the interests of the South African public as a whole.
It's 9 minutes to 11 here on SAFM, South Africa's news and information leader. We are in conversation with the Chief State Law Advisor, Enver Daniels, and we're talking about the Legal Practices Bill. Race has come up quite often in the questions that you had. How big of a problem is it within the profession?
Well, it appears to be a profession. If you just listen to it appears to be a concern. Just listening to Macbeth's question, he says he practices in Bombela, and he complains about the conditions under which he practices. If you look at the profession, despite our efforts over the years to introduce new legislation to make it possible, to make it easier for people to enter the profession, we've not been successful. I indicated to you that we have 20,000 practicing attorneys, 13,000 of those are white, 7,000 are black. More than half of the advocates happen to be white, and we are saying that we need to equalize those numbers. In fact, that was an attempt was made to address that in 1995 already by Dalla Umar. We gave attorneys the right to appear in the High Court. We dropped the language requirements. We dropped Latin. We said you only need a 4-year LLB. But even through those measures, we've not been able to equalize the numbers and, in fact, increase black representation within the profession. We were told in 1995 and 1994 by the historically black universities that if we didn't intervene, then it would take more than 20 years to simply equalize the numbers, that is, numbers of black and white attorneys. We're now 18 years into our democracy, and you can see we're nowhere near equalizing the numbers. And so we're hoping that the Legal Practice Council will, in fact, come up with some fairly innovative ideas to advise us on how we can increase access to the profession by black people.
There is, correct me if I'm wrong, you know, government is the biggest procurer of services, and you are supposed to also drive this transformation. But in most cases where you find there are government departments which are involved, you find the briefings being given to senior counsel that is white and not to the black firms.
Sure. That complaint is justified to some extent. We've made a lot of progress. You'll recall that last month, Minister Jeff Radebe announced the transformation of legal services within government. That transformation is going to take place at the same time as the transformation of the legal profession through the Legal Practice Bill. What government envisages is that it will be proactive, it will intervene, it will speak to the parastatals, Eskom, Transnet, the 3,000 odd parastatals around the country to look at their briefing patterns and to assist them to identify people who can provide service to them and who aren't white. It will look at promoting the smaller firms like Macbeth's firm in Bombela. It would look at establishing smaller firms in the rural areas, assisting people to open up in the rural areas, particularly assisting black practitioners and women practitioners, so that people have a whole range of legal firms they can go to. And so, yes, the government is intervening in the transformation of state legal services. It was a big announcement by Minister Jeff Radebe, and there are steps being taken by the Department of Justice to expedite that transformation. But it looks as if there will be a close relationship between legal services within government, within the parastatals, to look at how we empower blacks to do complex work and to do other types of work, not only for government, but for the business community and society in general.
Enver Daniels, the Chief State Law Advisor, will be back. And when we come back, I'd like us to look at the workshops that are envisaged with regards to discussing the bill. That's when we return.
Morning Talk on SAFM.
It's 3 minutes to 11. We are in conversation with Enver Daniels, the Chief State Law Advisor. Just 2 SMSs that came through. This is it's an unsigned one. It says, this will stop unscrupulous divorce lawyers in Durban from ripping women off. It's great. And somebody says, still the same old racist rubbish on SAFM. But Enver, these are uncomfortable issues that we have to deal with, especially when it comes to transformation.
Sure. They are uncomfortable because people are in a comfort zone. We've allowed the attorneys' profession and the advocates' profession to continue to operate as they did under apartheid, but we've tried to take them along, and we have been taking them along, and we're saying we need to change in the national interest and in the interest of the general South African public. And in fact, I mentioned that Dalla Omar had said to the profession, you come up with ideas. Pinol Maduna had said, you come up with ideas. Bridget Mabandla had said that you come up with ideas. Then Minister Khadebi came along and said, well, guys, we can't continue like this. We now have to come up with a bill which sets the foundation for the transformation of the legal profession. And he's been driving the process. He's been interacting with the profession. He's been interacting with other interested parties. And finally, we've come up with a legal practice bill. This will form the basis for the transformation of the profession. But bear in mind, we envisage that it will undergo extensive consultations in Parliament and perhaps extensive change. But we're hoping that the basic framework will remain in place.
What are the programs that you've got in mind to make sure that there is consultation?
No, lots of consultations have taken place under Minister Jeff Khadebi. We've consulted extensively with the profession and other bodies, and bear in mind Parliament is also obliged to consult. It has to hold public hearings, it has to hear the public and the profession, and Parliament has the right to change the bill in any way it wants to. The bill we've tabled in Parliament helps Parliament to consider the issues, but Parliament can make any changes which it wants to the bill. We are hoping that the basic framework will remain in place.
Well, thank you very much for sharing time with us. Enver Daniels, the Chief State Law Advisor, and he was telling us about the legal practice bill which was tabled in Parliament last month. It aims to put a framework in place that facilitates the transformation and restructuring of the legal profession.